and welcome to Beyond Reproach. This is Tuxel Urzel.
And Stephanie Domingo.
I am recording on land belonging to the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Wyandot nations.
I come to you from North Canton, Ohio, where I am recording on land belonging to the Kaskaskia Nation.
All of these nations are some of many still very much out here doing their thing, and y'all need to recognize.
Yeah. Better recognize.
You best recognize. For those who don't know, Beyond Reproach is the show about scandals and scandalousness in American politics and government. And as per usual, we be drinking and we be swearing.
And we be bantering like really early.
Oh my God. So like before we even finished the opening segment, we got lost on a tangent. Oh dear me. Stephanie's story today, she let me know, is from the colonial era, 1773. And we have talked a lot on the show before about how colonial Americans drank very differently from the way we drink today. Cocktails weren't even really a thing yet. They didn't exist yet. But on special occasions, punch was about as close as you could get in the late 1700s. Most of the time, you would just have like a plain hard cider, a beer, maybe some wine. You might have straight spirits, usually rum or whiskey or brandy, usually served warm because ice wasn't really a thing just yet. If you wanted to get fancy, you might add some water to your spirits or some sugar. Yeah. We've had, what was it? The whiskey, what was it? Whiskey sling that we drank back in episode 35 was literally just whiskey with some sugar and water added to it. Or sometimes they would mix different things together. Yard of flannel and stone fence were all common tavern drinks that combined spirits with beer or cider. We've had a few of these on the show already. We've had the stone fence, which is hard cider and rum mixed together, and we fucking hated it. It was disgusting.
I said then, and I will say it again, it tasted like a foot. It was so so funky. I was not prepared.
I really think a lot of it had to do with the hard cider that I chose. If we had chosen a sweeter, less funky hard cider, it would have been probably fine.
Yeah,
that's on me, rough. I think. Yeah. We've also had the flip. We had a hot ale flip, which was dark. It was like a nut brown ale, heated up and mixed with rum, molasses, and a whole egg.
Yeah,
which made it was so surprisingly delicious. We both were like, "Ugh, what is this?" And then it was so good. It was like thick and rich and creamy and almost tasted kind of like a latte, but with no coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, like a chai or something.
Yeah. It was surprisingly delicious.
It was really, really good.
So today we are drinking another popular colonial era tavern concoction that mixes dark beer, this time a porter style beer, with dark Caribbean rum. Sometimes they would use brandy or Applejack even to make this.
Oh, okay.
And a little sugar and nutmeg. Got to have that nutmeg in there. And
lime
sometimes,
juice, right?
Yeah, sometimes they would use lime juice. Not always. If they could get it and they had limes on hand, they would put lime juice in it as well. But that wasn't always. So this common colonial era beverage was called Rattle Skull, which was a British slang term for someone who talked too much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It basically meant that if you drank a Rattle Skull, you'd be spilling all the tea at the local tavern. It was,
okay.
Yeah, it's really, really good for loosening those jaw gums.
So is it like, I guess because of the rum in it, right? It like brings the proof up from just beer.
Yeah,
is that what they mean? Yeah, like it gets you drunk.
Yeah, and I guess your skull is rattling because you're talking so much.
Oh, of course. Okay, it was their version of a chatty Cathy.
Yes, exactly.
A rattle skull.
Rattle Skull.
Okay, cool.
So let's take a little taste. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, If you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington be a married man and never, never tell a lie?
Huh. It's good. It's better.
Yeah.
I thought that the lime juice was going to be really weird, but it doesn't
Me
taste
too.
citrusy. It's
Yeah.
just sort of sharp without
It's
being like, you don't taste lime.
Yeah, you taste a little something, but yeah, like you said, it's sharp. It's like
Yeah.
like a brightness to it. It's good. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it balances out like the nuttiness, or at
The
least the porter
porter.
that I have is kind
Yeah.
of nutty.
Mine is very sort of like coffee flavored, the porter that
Hmm.
I'm drinking. It's tasty. I feel like this would be really good in the fall.
Yeah,
Really good for
definitely.
like sitting around a campfire and drinking this would be
Mhm.
good. You just pour everything into a mug and stir it up and add the nutmeg on top. I will say that we're using a brown sugar syrup because that touch of molasses is much closer in flavor to the sugar that would have been available in the colonial era. But some rums are sweeter and some porters are maltier than others. So you might not actually need the sugar syrup. If you want, you can leave it out and taste before you add it to see if you need to put it in there. But I think it's nice. I don't, it's, you don't use very much. It's like what, half an
Yeah,
ounce.
yeah.
So I think it's really nice.
I think it's really good. I was not concerned, but I was just curious to know how it was all gonna blend together because I'm just like, citrus in this dark beer, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
weird.
Totally.
I wasn't worried about the rum because rum can blend into anything. I'm like, it's just gonna be
And
spicy and delicious.
yeah, and we've had these sort of like beer and rum mixtures before. It was
Yeah.
the lime juice was the outlier that I was like, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it just adds a little bit of like a brightness that you don't literally taste lime juice at all.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, it's nice. So that's the Rattle Skull. I don't really have a much history to go with it because it was, it's been around for a long time in the colonial era and people were just mixing shit together. So I don't know who invented it. I don't know where it was invented, but
Yeah.
people were drinking this in 1773. That's all I know.
And that's all we need.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess I'll jump in. So, I know that this happened, we record in advance and this is going to come out months or at least a month plus after the midterm. I feel like we need to
Yeah.
take a moment to celebrate ourselves and
Yes.
what we did.
Everyone deserves a pat on the back.
Yeah. I don't want to say like I'm an oracle, but like maybe I'm an oracle because I just felt like the media wanted this red wave so badly that it just didn't
Because
seem
it's good
based in
for
reality.
ratings.
Yeah.
When politics is mess, people
I'm
watch the news
like,
more.
I don't know. Like, I think that there are a lot of women who are like, no, and like the LGBTQ plus community is constantly under threat. Like, they're not down with this shit. Like, people of color as well. Like, we're gonna come out and say absolutely not. And that is what we did, and I'm really proud of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Gen Z also came out, like more Asian people voted in this midterm than in any other midterm. Like this
Wow.
is really, really
Y'all.
positive. And I think it is like a preview of things to come, hopefully.
Oh God, hopefully. I know. I
And like
don't
maybe I'm
want to
getting too
be.
hopeful, but like at the same
That's
time, I'm always hopeful. Like I'm a fucking Black woman in America. I have to be.
yeah.
Not there's no alternative.
Yeah.
For me, we're here because of our community, and all of the people that I mentioned like have community, and like that is what is nourishing and that's why we, despite the threat that we are constantly under, like it is our community that binds us and keeps us positive, at
Yeah.
least for me. And yeah, what we did was fucking historic. Yes, we had some losses. What can't you
Fucking
believe?
Lauren Boebert ended up
I
winning in the end.
know. I know. That was really heartbreaking. Because we
Yeah.
all
What are you gonna do?
danced so hard at the thought of her not winning. Like
Yeah.
it made me so
But like,
happy.
and we lost the House, but like,
it would have been outrageous for us to keep the House, but the fact that we have the Senate still,
yeah,
the last time that a party in power gained seats in the House was after 9/11. So we're in a
wow.
9/11 type of moment. Like, that is fucking historic. Like, this is something that we are
I
gonna tell
mean,
other generations that we did.
taking bodily autonomy away from women surprisingly is a bad look. Nobody could have predicted that.
However, white women didn't
I
fucking
know.
care in
Yeah.
mass. 70+% of y'all. Like, you need to get your
Really?
sisters together. Yes.
Jesus
In Georgia, I
Christ.
think it's 72% of white women voted for Herschel Walker. Like, get the fuck out of here. I don't know if
Oh
that
my
was
fucking
everywhere,
God.
but like 70+% of them did that. Like, you guys are voting like white men, and like, it is not a good look, girls, ladies. Get your
Well,
sisters
there's that whole
together.
thing about like, did you see that poll that I think it was Fox News put up something about how single women
Oh,
vote for
yes.
Democrats, but married
Yeah.
women vote? Yeah.
Yes.
Like married women are afraid to vote against their husbands. You
That's so
mean?
sad. That is so that's so disheartening. And I love that guy having a freak out about single women, and like he's like, "Oh, we're all depressed and like we don't want any man in our life." And it's like, we are living well because we don't have men in our lives.
Girl, nobody wants you fucking telling us who to vote for and shit. Calm down and take several
Yeah.
seats.
Yeah, he said women went crazy in this midterm.
I wonder why, asshole.
Oh,
Look around you. What do you
I
think
live.
happened that would have pissed off women this year?
He's again, I don't he doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Who could, I mean, how is anyone supposed to know what
He
might have
said,
happened?
"Ladies, we just need love." You know? We just need some love in our lives.
Well, maybe people are afraid to get your love because you're going to get them pregnant and then they have to be forced to have a baby that they don't want.
Yeah. It's trash, but
Nobody wants your love, motherfucker.
facts. You can say that again. Nobody wants your love, motherfucker. But yeah, we need to just celebrate ourselves because we did something really,
Yes.
really historic, and I think the news is kind of downplaying, and I hope when this comes out, we are still licking the tears of the Republicans in our lives because
Oh my
I want
God.
them to be sad for a really long time. I want them to I mean, they're not gonna reconsider their positions, but, like, I want them to be sad.
The one thing I'm very excited about is that this means that no matter what happens going forward in the future, Mitch McConnell will never be majority leader ever again for the
Yes.
rest of his life.
Yes. Isn't that delicious? Oh, it's so good. I
I mean, I
yeah.
still hope he gets dick cancer and dies, but like,
He's not gonna. Somehow he's gonna live longer than me. It makes no sense, but it's gonna happen. Like, it's the worst ones never die like they should.
yeah,
But it does make me happy that he's never gonna have that position of power again.
yeah. I don't
Uh,
understand like how he hasn't gotten like shell rot yet or
I love that. But I should probably get into my scandal, right?
uh
But we did that shit. Moving on.
yes.
So, in the dead of night, on the night of December 16th, 1773, several dozen colonists, most of whom were affiliated with the Sons of Liberty. Are you familiar with the Sons of Liberty?
I am not.
Oh, but you are. You don't know that you are, but you are. So
Okay.
they tiptoed above they tiptoed aboard 3 ships in the Boston Harbor. These ships were
Ooh.
carrying tea sent by the
Oh
East
my
India Company.
God.
Yeah, working through the night,
Okay.
these white dudes, some of whom were cosplaying indigenous folks. No one asked for that, but okay. They cut open 340 chests of tea and they dumped over 45 tons of tea into the waters of the harbor.
Oh my
This was a
God.
protest against the Tea Act that was imposed by the English that summer. You know, as everyone already knows, this event, we know it as the Boston Tea Party. And it still remains one of the most iconic moments in US history. History books,
I'm so
they
excited about
love
this story.
yeah, this story is good. History
So,
books what?
can
Go
I
on.
interrupt for just a second
Oh,
to say
please, please,
that when I did
'cause I
my
can have a
Detroit
sippy sip.
yes. Well, first of all, I wanna say I wish you had told me to make a cocktail with tea.
I know I didn't I wanted to tell you, but at the same time, I'm like, "He's gonna be so thrilled." So I'm just gonna
Yeah,
keep this shit
yeah.
to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should have told me. But anyways, I wanna
Well,
say
this story involves Samuel Adams, who is one of the
oh,
Sons of Liberty, so there's a little beer connection, even though he
okay,
has nothing
okay.
to do with beer, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not the beer that we're drinking. Um,
No.
but I actually had a whole part of my outline when I did my Detroit Uprising story. I had sort of a whole like ending segment that I ended up cutting for time because that story was so long, where I was talking about how people are like, oh, black people burning down their own communities, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, but do you have that same energy for white rebellions and white uprisings like the Boston Tea Party, Barbara? Do you, Barbara?
No. No, Babs doesn't. She don't. Yeah, that's amazing. Um,
So it's funny that like I wish I hadn't taken that out now because you were talking
oh,
about the
that would have
Boston Tea
been
Party.
so fun. Yeah. I really wanted to tell you, like, oh, when you said punch, I'm like, oh, maybe it's gonna be a punch with tea. And then I got the recipe that you sent and it was beer. I'm like, oh, I should have I
Yeah.
don't know.
I considered doing a punch, but it's so hard to make a punch in a small batch, and especially considering we're not recording together, it would be
Yeah.
so much work for you to find all
Oh,
these weird
yeah.
fucking
Oh
ingredients.
my god. Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. And I just felt like if I said tea, you would have known. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep it to myself. It's
I
fine. I
probably
really
would have
like
known.
this drink.
Yeah, no,
What?
it's tasty. Yeah.
Yeah, you said you wouldn't have known?
I probably wouldn't have. I mean, I'm honestly when you give me hints like that, I'm not trying to guess what your story is because
Yeah.
I want to be
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
It just seems like 17 anything and plus
Yeah,
tea.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
just
Yeah.
assume, like, let
Yeah,
me
you're
not say
right. You're
anything.
right. I might have
Because
guessed. Yeah.
it's so obvious. Like,
Yeah.
even if you slept for 90% of a history class, you know about this, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or
for
at least you
sure.
think you know about this.
Yeah.
So, the Boston Tea Party, it was a huge event. It's something that history books love to talk about. They fondly remember this like kind of carnival like atmosphere.
Imagine that. When there was an uprising against oppressors and there was a
Yeah.
carnival-like atmosphere and a bunch of destruction, and it was
Yeah.
white people doing
But it was white
the
people, so it was a great time. So this was a catalyst to the American Revolution. The story that I learned in school went something like this. These sturdy patriots responding to an increase in their, consumer goods. Things are being taxed more and they're not down with it. First, it was the Stamp Act. Now Britain was coming for their beloved tea, their PG tips, and they would not stand.
Yeah.
They were
Fuck
so
that.
pissed, right?
Gotta have your PG tips.
They were so pissed, they cried, "No taxation without representation," etc., etc. However, it turns out the tax that they were most tight about reduced colonial tea prices. But facts are stupid. Really, really
Really?
stupid. Yes. Reduce colonial tea prices. I'm gonna get into it, but so the scandal that I'm doing is the event that was known at the time as the Action Against the Tea or the Destruction of the Tea, which was a
Okay.
true act of rebellion and revolution, but just not the ones that we were told about in schools. But
Everything we
first,
learn is lies.
I mean, I'm gonna get into this, but it seems yeah, I shouldn't even say, but yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So much of what we were told as children especially was lies. They know that kids like to like dress up like Indians, and I feel like they kind of just latched onto that little bit and
Encourage
just ran
that.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But first, a toast. Let
A
us raise
toast.
our glass to the tax break that led to the creation of the United States of America.
Mm.
Cheers. But
Cheers.
I thought we hated taxes. So starting with Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia in 1676, overthrowing colonial governments just kind of became a thing that would happen semi-regularly. Not all the time, but
Okay.
like there would be this rebellious fervor that would rise up and would be squashed by the local
Mhm.
government, the people in charge at the time. So by 1760, there had been 18 mixed race uprisings. There had been 6 black
Wow.
rebellions and over 40 plus riots of various origins. Some of them were race riots, some of them were riots about other things. There's a lot of
Yeah.
unhappy people in the colonies. By this time, there also emerged a ruling class of like a white political and social elite who had been in the colonies for some time. They'd made their money and they were trying to protect what they had, which it makes
Mhm.
sense.
Imagine an oligarchy in America. I can't even
I'm
imagine.
just so glad you're sitting for all of this because like your knees would have buckled.
Wow.
Like
I mean,
what?
I literally,
You're shook. You're
I
shocked right now,
yes,
right? You're like,
yes.
do you want me to give you a moment? Collect
Yeah,
yourself.
I
So this local leadership, they saw the possibility of deflecting as much of this rebellious energy away from them and like towards England and England's local officials. Historians suspect that this was not a conscious conspiracy, but it was just a series of tactical responses to this rebellious energy, this fervor that was rising up every now and then.
Okay.
So, after 1763, with England victorious over France in the Seven Years' War, do you remember the 7 Years' War and OG Dubs kind of starting it?
I sure do,
Yeah.
yeah. Whoopsie daisy.
Whoops. Oh, him. Boys will be boys starting
My
world
bad.
wars.
Yeah.
So power hungry men who were in the colonies at this time, they were no longer threatened by the French. The French, if you remember, they had control of the fur trade, and the fur trade was extremely lucrative because they were
Mhm,
working with native peoples instead of just genociding them. I mean, they weren't
mhm.
doing great things. They were essentially stealing their fur, but like they were
Not
kind of
doing
like
as bad as the English, but
yeah,
still not great. Yeah.
they weren't great, but they were exploiting the native people. They were just like, "I'm gonna work with you so you can make me money." And like native
Yeah.
peoples, I mean, they had no idea of like commerce and like anything. They're just like, "Okay, this guy's not killing me, and he wants me to show them where the beavers and shit are, so I
Yeah.
can do that."
Yeah.
So with the French out of the way, these power hungry white men were just like they saw that they only had two things in their like in the way of them ascending to the top of the ladder. Not that the British were against them, but they saw the British and just indigenous people were like the last two things in their way. Um
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
I
British,
mean, story of this country, whatever.
yeah. Yeah, it's like the story of this country
You're in my way.
emerges so early. So the British, when they won this war against the French, they didn't want smoke with native people. They declared all Indian land, they declared like all land beyond the Appalachian to be Indian land, out of
Okay.
bounds to white settlers. They're just like, don't even look over there because we're not going to protect you if you try to steal their land. So
Uh-huh.
don't do it, girl. And this was very unpopular. Colonists, they knew that the colonists who didn't arrive with money, the only way to get wealth and like feel secure in this quote unquote new world is to have stolen land, you know? So
Literally, I mean, yeah. To this day,
to
that's
this
how you
day, I
build
know.
generational wealth is to have land,
Yes. Yes. And you just did a
to be
whole
a
story
property
about
owner.
redlining. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. They had to pay off their war debts because war is expensive.
Mhm.
And they looked to the colonies as kind of like a coin purse, like a
Sure.
pocketbook.
Yeah.
And
Pocketbook.
and this is the main conflict, that we had colonial elites who felt that they were less in need of British rule. They felt like stifled by British rule. At the same time, the British needed the colonists' wealth. They
Yeah.
needed that money. They needed those tax dollars. So I found a quote from Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. I got a lot of my information from the book's fourth chapter. It's called
Mm.
Tyranny is Tyranny. It's really, really good. It's dense, but it's good.
Yeah.
So this is from the book. He said that the war had brought glory for the generals, death to the privates, wealth for the merchants, and unemployment for the poor. Big
Shocking.
cities, I know, right? Big cities had expanded rapidly during the war, and there were all these newspaper headlines that complained of beggars and what they considered wandering poor who are in the
Ugh.
streets of their cities, and they didn't like that. However, at the same time, there were these editorials that questioned the distribution of wealth. Like when regular people were allowed to write in the paper, they're just like, but what about this? Like, why are there people in the street when like this man has all of the money? Like, make it make sense, friends. Make
This
it make
is
sense. I
like
know this is like today.
it's today. Literally, there's
I
fucking
know.
like all the rich people are complaining. But fuck, did you hear about fucking? I'm sorry to go on a tangent. I'm
No,
sorry to
please
deviate.
do.
Did you hear about Gwyneth Paltrow urging
No.
all of her followers to vote Republican in California because all the rich people in California want a Republican governor to come in and clear out all the homeless people so they don't have to look at them anymore? Because the homeless problem in LA is so visible.
Is she even out though? Like, ew.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're not going to go Republican in LA. Like it
No, but
wasn't going
there
to
was
happen.
no, but there was a guy who was Republican who became a Democrat who ran against a
Oh,
Democrat, and he
Jesus
almost won.
Christ.
And a lot of people like Katy Perry was backing him, and probably Gwyneth. I didn't know about her, but like I think I know what you're talking about. I think it's this
Yeah.
guy who was a lifelong Republican, but ran against, knows that he's in California, that he can't be a
So
Republican.
he's doing cosplay as a Democrat.
Correct. Yes, and he
He
lost.
changed his middle name to low tax.
Exactly. He lost to a black woman who is totally an
Yeah.
establishment Democrat, but, like, better than that.
Sure,
Better
of
than
course.
that.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that I mean, my point is that like rich people are like, "Ugh, homeless people. I don't want to look at that."
But are they really seeing, like, are they going outside of
It's
their little
incredibly
mansions?
visible. You can't go anywhere
Oh,
without
is
seeing
it?
them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So do something about that.
Exactly. Hello.
How is, like
Maybe like you want to just throw them in the river? Like what just fix it.
oh my god. Like, yeah, I don't wanna go off on a huge tangent, but, like, during the pandemic, New York, because so few people were coming to the city because we were a hotbed of sickness, I
Yeah.
don't know if you know about this, but they opened up hotels and they housed the homeless there, and they gave them medical care, and so many, I wanna say it was like 50% of them were able to get jobs and, like, get
Oh my
off the
God.
system. They just needed housing to do that. They needed a
Yes.
safe place, they needed Wi-Fi. And they
How are
got
you
off the system, like, this is
how are you supposed to get a job if you don't have anywhere to take a shower or use
yeah,
the internet or
and
print
it's just
something or
it's so it's yeah. God, yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but they were, like, shocked by this. They're like, "Oh, that's I what? Giving
nobody
people
told
help?"
me that, that helping people would help them.
Basically, basically. Oh my god, it's yes, that is a direct quote. Nobody told me that helping people would help them. It's true. So, going back to my story, unfortunately, I could talk
Sorry.
about
Yeah.
this forever. But so during this time, similar to today, 10% of Boston's taxpayers had about 66% of Boston's taxable wealth, while the
Mm,
lowest 30% of tax-paying population had no taxable property at all. The
wow.
propertyless people this was back then. They could not vote. So they, like indigenous
Ah,
people, like black people, like white women, could not even, not only could they not vote, they could not participate in town meetings because they, at this
really?
time, they were barring, yeah, they were barring like, I guess, city council meetings to people who could vote. They're like,
Landowners. Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to hear
Wow.
you poor people. Like you're not going to vote for me. Get the fuck out of here. So this included like
Jesus.
sailors, people who were apprentices, people who were servants, and just like a lot of working, like laboring classes of people were not able to just hear about governmental processes that were directly affecting their lives.
Yeah.
So in Boston,
Jesus.
the lower classes, they're just like, fuck this. There's more of us than there is of you. So what you gonna do? So they started showing up to meetings. They would barge into these town meetings and they would vent their grievances. And yeah, it was incredible. And it's like, why
Good for
can't we
them.
tell?
That's
Yes. And like this is why I did this story, because it's like there's so many things that we should learn about that are just
Mhm.
like so revolutionary in the real sense of revolution, that but we
Yeah.
don't want to talk about that. Um
Yeah.
so the governor of Massachusetts, he wrote this in his diary, and I fucking cackled when I read this. And he's talking about these town meetings. He says, "The meanest inhabitants by their constant attendance there generally are the majority and outvote the gentlemen, merchants, substantial traders, and all the better part of the inhabitants."
That's so mean of them to have their own opinions and
Yes, they're
care
just so
about
mean.
their own lives. Yeah.
They really just they hurt my feelings, and they're not
Oh
part of
my God.
the better part of the inhabitants that aren't mean to me.
Wow. Okay. Mhm, mhm. Go off,
Grow
sis.
up. Grow up. So, what happened was in Boston around this time around this time of the destruction of the tea, there were certain lawyers, editors, just like people about town, but also smugglers.
Mhm.
Smugglers, I think I might do a mini about this. They were fucking running shit in the colonies,
Wow.
just doing all like black market trades and yeah, but also making so much money that they became part of the upper echelon of society. Not like British upper echelon, like,
Sure.
5% as opposed to the 1%.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so these people with other business owners, they felt like they were being excluded from certain ruling circles of
Aw.
Englishmen. Yes, they were being excluded. So they decided that they were going to low key organize a working class mob for them. Yeah,
Okay.
right? So they use speeches, editorials, because a lot of them, like I want to say the owner of the Boston Gazette was part of the Sons of Liberty. And it's so funny, we think of these revolutionaries, Sons of Liberty, as like rabble rousers, and it's like no, they were all business owners. They were really wealthy men. They were not in their 20s, they were in their 40s. Like these were
Uh-huh.
men who were just protecting their own.
Yeah.
So they use speeches and editorials to influence the working class. They shape their opinions and they mobilize them into action. These elites were keenly aware of the declining fortunes, mostly because of them, and the resentment that came along with this of just ordinary townspeople. But they were frightened by the thought that the mob that they created, that their grievances might spill over to them. They're like, don't look at our wealth. Look at the British.
Yeah.
Look at them. And here we have American politics kind of in a nutshell.
It's the same fucking shit that's happening today.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone can vote, but like
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
most people anyways.
most people can vote. Yeah. Compared to back
Yeah.
then, a lot more. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
everyone can
We're
vote compared to
fighting
then.
yeah, people, the ruling elite that don't want people to be able to vote have found ways to make sure that certain people can't. But
Yeah.
for the most part, most people can vote. But other than that, it's the same fucking shit. And this story has happened over and over and over. It's like the
Yes.
whiskey rebellion that I mean,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
the ruling elite and not the British at the
Mhm.
time, but like
Yeah.
No, the poor people are like,
Yeah.
fuck you. We
Yeah.
traded in, we fought for you against the British, and now you're doing the same shit to us that the British did. Fuck
Yep.
you.
Yeah. So these wealthy people, they felt I don't know. I just reading I did a lot of research for this and most of it came from Howard Zinn. It does seem like these wealthy white dudes, despite having so much power and influence, they did feel poor compared to the British, which is
Uh,
like not I know it's not an excuse, but like I think if you believe that you're poor, then you can get poor people on your side. And I think that is what happened back then.
well, yeah,
Like
that's like
it's not a
the
lie if you believe
Bacon's
it kind
Rebellion
of
thing
thing.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, my swimming pool isn't as big as the guy next door.
Yeah.
Oh.
My cousin only gave me 1,200 acres of land. That
Yeah.
guy has 15 acres of land. It's not fair. Yeah, so that was just all background. So let's get into
Yeah.
the action against the tea. So,
Okay.
the saga began with the British government's bailout of a corporation that was deemed too big to fail. The East India I know, it's like all of the
Oh, the
parallels.
British East India Company. Oh my
Yeah, the
God.
British East India Company, they enjoyed record profits because it had a monopoly since the 1600s in South Asia. They basically they didn't own China, but they like really controlled the Chinese market, but also they owned most of the Indian subcontinent.
Mhm.
So they were just running shit,
They
lining their
were
pockets.
the Amazon of the of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in 1772, the company was hit really, really hard by the collapse of the European stock market. Capitalism did what capitalism does. It
Mhm.
went kaput. It went
Yeah.
bust. It shot the bed. So this company had all of this like unsold goods that sat in their warehouses that they had to pay for, and during this time, colonial smugglers, people like John Adams and co, they were filling a void left by this huge behemoth of a company
Oh.
struggling. They're like, "Oh, we're going to make all of the money." Like they so the East India Company, they put all of not all of their money in the stock market, but most of their money. So like all of the
Okay.
ill-gotten gains that they made by just stealing the resources of Asia, they put into the stock
Mhm.
market.
Okay.
And when it went bust, they was po. They got no
Oh.
monies. Yeah.
Wah, wah.
So they approached the British government, outturned pockets. Hey guys, like, can you help us? We are one of the like we
We
give
need a
you
bailout.
yeah, that's what they said. Like, we're one of the biggest companies in this whole empire. Like, you're not gonna let us go bust like that. Like, you need us, right? So you're gonna
Yeah.
you're gonna help us. So members of parliament in like I love British parliament. I love how they really just try to shame people, and it's just like very theatrically done. So they staged these committees. They had all these hearings where they, like finger wagged at these greedy company officials because they had returned from India and China fucking rich. But then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like they have all these debts. Like
Uh-huh.
it all of the money just went into their pockets instead of into the company, and they're just like, "No, we're not."
Imagine that.
I know, right?
It's so
This story is
it's
today.
exactly the same thing that's happening fucking
Right.
300 years later. Jesus
I
Christ.
when I found this story, I'm like, "Oh, this is today. This could be ripped from the headlines. This is
Literally.
today." So they finger wag. They're just like, You should have done better." But they fucking didn't do better. So the MPs, these members of parliament, they were trying to figure out a way to keep this company solvent. They thought about maybe nationalizing part of it temporarily. I
Elizabeth
know.
Warren was there.
Yes. They were just by any means necessary, they were trying to keep it afloat because if
Yeah.
they failed, especially because they just had this big war with France, if they failed, the British Empire not would crumble, but like would be significantly like impaired if they went
Yeah.
under. So they were trying to find ways to work with them.
Mhm.
They discussed schemes about unloading, like how on earth can we unload this? Apparently, they had 18 million pounds of surplus tea at this time.
Jesus.
What? You guys need
Stuck
to
in a
stop
stuffing
robbing.
Yeah, stuck in a shipping container in the Suez Canal. Just
Yeah, basically. So the European market was already saturated at this time because there was a lot of trade coming out of Holland. Like the Dutch had their own system going. Like the Dutch, we have the Dutch to thank for capitalism. So they were already on this shit, like trying to rob Asia even before the British did it. I mean, the British did it more, but like the Dutch started it. So they already had shipping routes long
okay.
established.
Yeah.
And that's how the smugglers in the colonies were getting their tea, was through the Dutch.
Ah, I see.
So the MPs, they were saying, okay, we need to help the East India Company. They need to do better, but we need to help them. Their idea was to reduce their tax burden. They wanted to find some way that they could
Mhm.
reduce the tax burden for this big company and allow them to offload their excess tea.
Mhm.
And since the European market was so saturated, they're like, we're gonna dump this on the Americans. We're gonna make it rain tea over there, and it's gonna be great. So there were two routes that they could do this because there were the two taxes involved. One tax was on the tea coming through Britain on its way from India and China. That's like one leg of the journey that they can tax. And they can also tax the like import duty, like when it arrives in the colonies. Historians suspect that they could have cut both taxes and still made their numbers work, but they didn't. They decided that they were going to eliminate the tax on goods coming from China into Britain. They're like, y'all don't got to pay any tax.
Wow.
I'm like, again,
Okay.
this could be ripped from the headlines.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But they decided that because the American colony is still a colony, like we need to make them pay something. We can't
Yeah. Yeah.
completely just let them, I guess, have all this excess tea for a very, very discounted price. They decided that they were going to reduce the tea tax moderately. They would still have to pay it, Americans. So the
Okay.
only people who stood to kind of suffer from this change in policy were the smugglers. They feared that there would
Okay.
be big financial losses when they had to compete with the British for prices.
Sure. I get that. Okay.
Yeah, because these colonial smugglers, they had become elite based on this illegal business peddling duty-free tea from Holland.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
now the tea from Britain also duty-free. So like
Uh-huh.
what
Like,
we
wait a
gonna do
minute.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. They were like, wait a minute. So, some of these men just so happen to be Sons of Liberty, and Sons of Liberty are the ones who did, who dumped out all the tea. Just
Uh-huh.
coincidence. Quinky dink.
Shocking. Yeah. Quinky dink. Yeah.
So few people in London thought that this sweetheart deal would be newsworthy. They thought, okay, surely American colonists would not object to getting discounted tea, like good
Yeah.
tea at bargain prices.
Yeah.
They were getting
I'll take it.
they were getting high quality tea that was at the same price or slightly lower than what they were getting on the black market because of this
Mhm.
reduction. Because this Tea Act of 1773, it reduced the tax. It didn't eliminate it, but it reduced it. But they were wrong. They were totally wrong. Colonists, they were not happy. Their fundamental issue was that they wanted to be governed by themselves. They wanted to make their own taxes, and then rule the colonies as they saw fit. Even though they were getting a tax break, they're like, we didn't vote for this tax. Like, we don't have a
Sure.
representative in parliament who is advocating on our behalf. Because maybe if we
Uh-huh.
did, like our elites would say like, actually, no, don't make it cheaper for colonists because we have our own business going.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
I know, which is fucked up.
Oh my God.
Right?
So the rich Americans were like, no, you can't make tea cheaper.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
You can't make tea cheaper because we got the cheaper tea. You can't be competition? The free market? We claim to love it. But yeah, right? Isn't this story amazing?
That's what this is all about.
Yeah, so they wanted to tax and rule themselves. Their rallying cry was no taxation without representation. But it wasn't down with high taxes, which is what Fox News like wants us to believe. Like,
sure, that's
the
what
chief
we have been told our
motivator.
entire lives.
Yo, we've been lied to. Like the founding fathers, it was about representation. It was not about low taxes at all. At all. It was fucking lies. So land taxes and poll taxes, as well as import duties of like sugar, molasses, wine, they were all a much greater tax burden compared to this, tax on tea. Do you know anything about the Stamp Act?
I mean, not really. I've heard of it, and I know that it was an issue, but I don't.
It caused a really big rebellion, and I don't even really know the finer details. But like the Stamp Act, it went through in 1765, and they like the British Parliament was just literally trying to tax everything that like colonists need. And they eventually, I think it was like, it took them 4 years. There were all these protests. They had to reverse it. There's like, okay, actually, no, we don't want these problems. Like, we're just going to tax certain things. So the tea tax was a relic of an act called the Townshend Revenue Act. This happened 2 years after the Stamp Act. And it placed import duties on things that the colonists needed to just like build, like things like paint, paper, lead, glass, and certain metals were taxed. And they're just like, no, girl, again, like the Stamp Act, like you can't do this to us. We are a growing colony. We need glass, we need lead, even though lead is going to kill us. We need lead. We need all of these things. So
I mean, we didn't know that until like the 80s.
I know. Like I shudder to think like how much lead was even happening back then. Cause it's like, it sounds like they built their houses in lead. So it took 3 years to have this Townshend Act repealed, and they repealed all of these taxes except for the tea tax. They decided that they were going to keep a 3 pence per pound tea tax. And this tax was so minuscule, it was barely felt by most of the colonial consumers who always at this time had access to smuggled tea. They were not buying this tea. So it's just like, okay, whatever. Yeah, you can tax me, but like I'm getting it from this dude I know, and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So yeah, tax away. So this tea tax, it was symbolic. It was kind of a thing that colonists could rally against. The average commoner would maybe enjoy like a sip or two of tea once in a blue, but they weren't doing the whole like British tea thing. They didn't have, the cutlery, all of the porcelain and shit. Like that stuff was really prohibitively expensive for the vast majority of people in the colonies. So calling for a boycott on tea paired nicely with just the whole lower class revolutionary sentiment that was happening on the ground.
Sure.
Tea was an easy and just very popular target. And I feel like now is time for a good time for a break.
Yeah.
A little tea time.
Okay. Tea time. All right. We'll be right back.
Welcome to #History. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah. And if you're a history nerd,
or even a history hater,
this is the podcast for you.
Even if history was your least favorite subject in school, we can guarantee you will like this podcast because we talk about all the things that your history textbooks did not.
Things like how the Bonnie Prince Charles and his Jacobite uprising was was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, or how the pharaoh Akhenaten was so disliked by Egyptians that they literally purged his name from nearly all of their records and pretended like he had never existed.
And we do all of this while drinking and rating a custom-made cocktail specific to that week's topic.
So grab a drink, take a seat, and hang out with us each week as we learn all about history's greatest stories of controversy,
Conspiracy,
and corruption.
So yeah, we're back, y'all.
That we are.
I
made a
so-
tinkle.
You made a tinkle. What is it? What's that like bathroom sign that people have? Like, if you sprinkle when you tinkle, be a sweetie and wipe the seedy. Yes. Have you seen that?
Oh my God. No.
Oh, maybe this is just in Black households. It's usually done in like needlepoint, and it's like right above the toilet.
Oh my God. I need that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna post something. This is ubiquitous. Like, I've seen it so many times in my life.
I've never. Oh my God.
Wow. Oh my God. My grandmother had it.
I love it.
So yeah, back to tea. So tea, I don't know if you know this, but it was like a boogeyman around this time. It was
Oh.
people like moral panicked about tea. Tea was like the gay community back then.
Trans?
Yeah, the trans community, totally.
Oh my God.
So tea consumption was deemed suspect and even sinful by a large segment of the American public. Abigail Adams called it that baneful weed.
Oh my God. And we were drinking what, coffee, or just not consuming caffeine at all?
I'm not sure.
I don't know if we had a
I
source
guess
for
not.
coffee at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we did. I think it was just tea. And I thought
Okay.
everyone was drinking tea until researching this story. I'm like, I didn't know tea was bad. Tea to me is so
my
mild
God.
compared to coffee. Like, what?
It was just, it was moral panic for the purpose of rich people to get richer. I mean, like, it's an invented
Yeah.
moral panic. It's like trans rights and
Yeah. It was invented, but it's like yeah, I'm gonna get into it, but it's like the usual sort of issues of like, yeah, anyone's that's different. There's some
they
racism.
use the Bible to justify it.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course there's racism because this is because we are us. So
Because you know how Black people love to drink tea.
it was Asian people. Yeah, but anyways, I'm gonna get into it. So
Of course. Oh my God.
yeah. So to her and other people, tea was considered a recreational drug. Like, girl, get out of
Tea?
here. Tea,
Oh
recreational
my.
drug. It is crazy, right? Yeah. So there at this time there were these people who were like promoters of virtue and who had been long pointing at the evils of tea. After this destruction of tea, they become patriots instead of just like creepy people screaming about tea for some reason. They're now like in fashion and in vogue. So there's
You
all
know
these
what this is kind of giving me
what?
is the marijuana industry and
Oh.
how like
Oh.
weed is bad and it's immoral,
Yes.
but like
Yes.
the government can tax it and it's way more
To-
expensive but if you buy it from a drug dealer and
But
you're
if
not
you
paying
buy-
tax,
Yes.
that's criminal. You're
Oh
a
my
criminal.
God. Totally. Yes. Yes. That is the parallel. That is the modern parallel for sure. Yeah. Yeah, you nailed that. Wow. I didn't even think about that. It's so true. Yeah. It's fucking trash. Trash, y'all. This is trash. So there's all these people who again have been like on their little soapbox pointing at tea and like no one's paying them any mind because it's like it's fucking tea, girl. Get off it.
Yeah.
But after the destruction of the tea, it now becomes this movement, this like revolutionary symbol. Tea, you know,
Mhm.
tea is just so bad. Tea is a tool of our oppressors, etc. I know. So there was a very concerned writer in a Virginia newspaper, and I'm just like, this is so classic. This is very Virginia. So they claim that ever since tea had been introduced into Western society, and like once I read this is from Howard Zinn. Once I read Western society, I'm like, oh, this is about to be some shit. This is about to be some really racist shit. Like, let me just prepare my mind. And I was not wrong. So this writer went on to say that, yeah, ever since tea had been introduced into Western society, our race is dwindled and has become puny, weak, and disordered to such a degree that were it to prevail a century more, we should be reduced to mere pygmies.
This is like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that straight people are going to go extinct.
Correct. Yes. That is exactly what I thought about when I read this. I'm like, wow, this is like I laughed at her. I know this country. I know. It all goes so deep.
To know that it has been like this from the very fucking beginning, since before the beginning.
Since before the beginning of this country.
It kind of makes me feel better about the way things are now, because it's just like this is just human nature. This is just the way we do shit.
Yes. Yeah, that is how I felt too. Because I think some people could go the opposite way and feel really demoralized, like, oh, we've been doing this forever. And I'm like, no, this is just who we are as
it is fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's never gonna end, I guess. But like
yeah. I don't think it's never gonna end. I think the more that we realize the pattern and can see it for what it is, we can change.
We've had what, 250 years to figure it out, and here we are still.
No, but like the story that we tell about the Boston Tea Party ain't this, you know?
Well, that's the thing, is like in theory, we've had all this time to figure it out, but we don't know the details because nobody's talking. We're literally, American history is lies. As it's taught in schools.
As it's taught in schools, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think more and more people are reading history books like Howard Zinn's, and like they have access to the internet. And I do think things are changing. Not only like will they change, they're changing now. And that gives me hope. But like it's so crazy. But also it does make me feel better. I feel less crazy knowing history. Personally,
totally. Yeah, I mean it
like seeing the thread in the like seeing like, okay, I can trace this back, like I'm not going crazy, like they saw this then, but we just never learned it, and here we are.
It's nuts. Like this is so, it's not even a thread, it's the same thing.
It's the same, right? It is the same.
It's just the same shit over and over and over on repeat with different players.
Yeah.
If it's not the British East India Company, it's fucking Amazon or Walmart or whatever. Like, if it's not tea, it's weed. If it's not like pygmies, it's trans people.
Pygmies.
Like, what are we talking about? Pygmies.
I'm like, when I read that, I'm like, when in doubt, racism. Like, what? Pygmies? Get the fuck out of here. So, and this is just going on this this thread of people, experts, mind you, the dangers of tea. You guys, watch out! It's gonna make you into a pygmy. So
the devil's lettuce.
That baneful weed, you mean? That baneful weed.
Yes.
You mean like what? Okay, so pointing there was this really prominent surgeon in Boston who, I guess he wrote a bunch of like op-ed articles in the Boston Gazette, and he just was almost like the Dr. Phil, like the star doctor. People went to him for advice. Oh, he was like a Dr. Oz.
I was just gonna say,
meaning a con. He was a con.
Just like I thought. Trash,
yeah. So this guy, his name is Dr. Thomas Young. He was pointing to his medical expertise in talking about tea in, papers. So brace your fucking self. Hold on to your butts, y'all. So he called tea a pernicious drug. And he went on to say that it is a slow poison that has the corrosive effect upon those who handle it. Bitch, is it acid? corrosive effect. Okay, sure.
my God.
He goes on to say, I have left it off since he said, I have left it off since it became political poison. It's tea. It's not
Political
poison.
poison. Oh my
Yeah.
God. But like,
He's
I'm sorry, Rattle Skull is fine. You're like, no big deal.
right.
Just keep
Yes.
drinking your fucking like weird bootleg Applejack that you froze in your front yard and
Yeah,
like
that's
is
giving you like brain cancer because it's
yeah.
like so impure and there's just all the bacteria in it. But yeah, go off.
But
So he
like
said,
tea.
yeah, since he got away from this poison, he says that I have since gained in firmness of constitution. My
Oh.
substitute is chamomile flowers. Bitch, that's also tea. Bitch, that's also tea. Respectfully, sir, you
See,
sound dumb.
I love that he's like, I switched from PG
Yeah,
tips to sleepy time.
yes. I
And
switched y'all, I switched from tea to tea, and
yes.
I my constitution has never felt better.
Oh my God, that sleepy time tea. Just I'm a changed man.
He's a better man because he's not messing with that drug. He's not on that dope that's
Oh
called
my God.
black tea.
Well,
So,
it's called
oh
black
yeah,
tea for a reason.
oh, once I said that, I'm like, oh, you right, you right. So, oh no. so, so resistance leaders, they also launched a new wave of just like the worst nativist propaganda that played into these anti-Chinese sentiments that were already active at the time. They claim that tea from the East India Company was packed by the stomping of barefoot, flea infested Chinese feet. Yeah.
How-
Ignoring the fact that tea smuggled in like via
like,
Holland
where do you
also
think that?
came from fucking China.
Yeah, literally, where do you think that the Dutch are getting their tea? Where do they like? You think they grew it in fucking Holland? Come on, Barbara,
But
get a grip.
also, they're like the caucasity of being concerned about people's feet when you're not washing your legs.
Oh my
Like
God,
it is
and
that for me.
and also on top of that, fleas don't live on your feet. There's nothing
They
on your foot for a flea to live on.
look at you trying to make
I
sense out of
can't.
racism.
Yeah. I mean, no, I shouldn't have even said that because it don't. Yeah, it don't make no sense, and I'm not going to make sense of it.
It
You can't
doesn't
make sense
make
out of nonsense.
you can't make sense out of nonsense. So because of all of this, I mean, people were just very, very influenced by these newspaper people, these elites in charge. They were really good at messaging. I mean, similar to how the right is now. They
Mhm.
really got a number of colonists, believing that they had like the good safety and that, anything else was, suspect.
The smugglers got.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, well, that is where
But
the
it was
deviation
kind of like
between the weed industry and the tea thing. It's the other way around, where the dispensaries are like, no, it's safe. You
oh
can, you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
No, but this is like it was like a kind of like a buy American vibe and like not buy
aha,
Chinese. Yeah.
sure, yeah,
Which
because
again is with us right now still. Yeah. It's
yes,
like
buy
this
American, smuggled from Holland, from China, but don't tell anyone. Shh. You're just putting their fingers to to the
to
other
their lips.
people's lips. Shh.
Trash.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
doo
Smuggled.
doo.
Proudly smuggled by Americans.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. Proudly smuggled by Americans. Um, incredible. So this whole there's so many themes. It was hard for me to really when I started researching this story, really find like one note about because there's just so many intersecting issues that
Yeah.
are so
Yeah.
fascinating that are still happening today. But I
Wow.
had no clue. I'm just like, wow, this is like everything is in this story in a way. We have
Everything.
anti-Chinese racism, we have the war on fucking drugs, we have anti-corporate sentiment, we have like something that's too big to fail. Like it's just it has
Wild.
everything. So the morning after were you
Well,
saying?
I was just going to say, and like lies that we have been taught
Oh yeah,
since
of course.
childhood. The
Yeah.
fact that this story
Yeah.
is so unbelievably different from the story that we learned as children
Night and day.
is like it should be illegal to lie to people about
Yeah.
history in
Yeah.
schools.
But it's like this story is so riveting because it has everything, and yet but also it has everything that we don't want to talk about.
Well, and that's the thing. They don't want
Yeah.
people to be interested in history, so they're not going to tell us the real shit because it's too
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Oh, the story has so much. I could do like minis that like spun out of my research for like
Yeah. Yeah.
years perhaps. But yeah. So the morning after, John Adams, he penned a letter. You know, John Adams is like one of the patriots. He's a signer of the Declaration. He penned a letter to his friend James Warren. He wrote, "The die is cast. The people have passed the river and cut away the bridge. Last night, 3 cargoes of tea were emptied into the harbor. This is the grandest event which has ever yet happened since the controversy with Britain opened. The sublimity of it charms me."
Okay, girl.
Right? I'm just like,
Also,
like, are you?
how much tea are we talking here? Like, how much do you know? Do you have an idea of like how much 3 cargoes is?
It
Is that
was, it was like, what is it, 45 tons?
okay?
It
All right,
was,
that's a
yeah, it
lot
was
of fucking tea.
yeah, 45 tons of tea. And that wasn't all of their tea. That was just what was in the harbor in these 3 ships.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was a lot of fucking tea. Die is cast. Yeah, it fucking charms him, whatever. But this opinion was far from universal. If anything, like the opposite was true. For Americans who called themselves patriots at this time, the slogan of like liberty and property were the biggest emphasis. It was like even bigger than no taxation without representation
Mhm.
was the like front and center. It was sadly property. Like it was
Sure.
property and liberty, but mostly property. And the fact
Yeah.
that property
Like,
was destroyed was like,
yeah. What about the free market, Sam?
yeah. Not Sam. Yeah. So George Washington, he, you know, everyone loves G Dub, OG Dub.
OG
He
Dub.
was among many prominent like leaders of the time who came out and like kind of scolded Boston for their actions.
Wow.
He said that their conduct in destroying the tea was a stain on the nation.
Huh.
Benjamin Franklin, or B. Franklin, father of Franky Franklin. I will never forget that. Like, I could not believe that you were just like Franklin. I'm like, wait, his name is Franky Franklin.
Franky Franklin.
What the fuck?
Oh my god.
He died. You said he died of embarrassment.
Oh,
He died of smallpox, but we shouldn't be laughing. But also, maybe a little bit, he died of embarrassment. Just a little.
Enough time has passed. It's okay to have a chuckle.
Yeah. Oh my god, I laughed so I laugh. I feel like I laughed myself into a sweat when you said that he died of embarrassment. Because yeah, it was so good, so wrong. But B. Frank, he came out similarly to OG Dub. He said that the East India Company should be compensated for its losses. You know, won't someone think of the
Poor
property?
them. Yeah. Oh Lord. Who's gonna
So
compensate them? You don't even have a government. You're a colony.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna get into it a little bit, but yeah, they tried to like round up people. Thankfully, most people were keeping their fucking mouths shut. as they should. So fast forward 50 years, like I'm kind of jumping ahead and I'm going to jump back, but like 50 years past this destruction of the tea, or the action with the tea is another way that they at the time referred to this event. There was no celebration 50 years after this happened. And that is
Yeah.
very odd because colonists fucking celebrated everything. They celebrated
Hmm.
things at the 10-year mark, let alone the 50-year mark. They were like,
Wow.
they were just, I think a lot of it was because they were drunk all the time and like,
Yeah.
why not celebrate things?
Sure. Yeah.
But 50 years, they were not talking about this event at
Huh.
all. Like for decades, Americans or, American colonists, they did not want to talk about it, and they definitely did not consider it the Boston Tea Party. Like that's a fucking
Yeah.
lie. Most people at the time, like most white people at the time, they viewed this destruction of tea as an act of vandalism that put the revolution in a bad light, and they did not want to even acknowledge that it happened in their city.
Weird. They had strong
Yeah.
words for other white people?
Yeah, well, it was like it was that contradiction of like thinking that they were like the good, like peaceful type that would,
Not these
but it was,
nasty
but the British,
smugglers.
no, but like the British were these aggressors. Like we were following the
Oh,
rules, we were doing all the right
sure.
things, and then the British, they wanted to take all our money, and we had to fight. Then they didn't want to talk about all of the uprising. This was a big one. So
Yeah.
right after it, this happened, fucking crickets. Anyone who had anything to do with the event could face prosecution, or at the very least a lawsuit, because they were really out for like financial compensation for the
Yeah.
loss of their fucking tea. And people fucking knew. Boston was big, but it wasn't like that big. And the people that were
Yeah.
involved were the Sons of Liberty, who like they were not like in the shadows. These were
Yeah.
prominent
Yeah.
members of the community. And yes, a lot of them on this night they disguised themselves as indigenous people, or some of them just put like soot on their face, like they blacken their face, and it's just like, fucking Jim, I can see you. Like
Uh-huh.
I I can
Oh my
see you and
God.
I know what you did. But people kept their mouths shut.
Yeah.
Um Publicly no one said a word. So back to the tea. It was
Okay.
not the action against the tea that pulled Americans together. It was the British clapback that did.
Ah, I see. Okay.
It was the
Huh.
clapback.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah. So in the several years that followed, there were a series of laws that were dubbed by the British the coercive acts, but by the American colonists, they called them the intolerable acts.
Hmm.
So Parliament, they closed the port of Boston, which was huge. Like Boston was a huge shipping hub. So much money flowed into Boston. They shut down Boston Harbor. They revoked Massachusetts charter, and
Wow.
they denied citizens the rights that they had enjoyed for over a century and a half. And
My.
the goal
Wow.
of these,
Yeah.
yeah, the goal of these coercive acts were to isolate these, like, radicals in
Uh-huh.
Massachusetts, these sons of liberty. But instead, like the downstream consequence was that all of the colonies united with Boston and said, absolutely not, you're not going to do this to us. So all
Mhm.
13 colonies, they linked up like Voltron, and they said, no, girl, no, what we're not going to do is this. So they formed
Uh-huh.
the constitutional continental. They formed the Continental Congress, not the
Yeah.
Constitutional Congress. I'm like, that's a B flat.
Convention? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. But yeah, so
Yeah.
they formed the Continental Congress
Yes.
and agreed to mount a general boycott of all
Okay.
British goods at a time when the crown needed that coin.
Yeah.
They needed that money,
Wow.
honey. This was not the time to fuck with Britain, and this is why we went to war. So the destruction of the tea, it was the spark for events that would sprawl into our push for independence. and its belligerent tone and its property damage, it ran counter to the narrative, favored by,
Yeah.
patriots, quote unquote patriots at the time. They're like, maybe we don't talk about this so loudly because like we did bad things.
Uh-huh.
so so myth needed to be created eventually. So
Sure. Yeah.
after the revolution was over, the nation was on its own. This event was still very, very tough to mythologize properly because this new leadership, they wanted to maintain law and order. They didn't want people to think like, okay, maybe we can just put on costumes and like overthrow the shit. So they
Yeah.
didn't want to
Yeah.
talk about this, this destruction of the tea. They didn't want to talk about how all these smugglers and these rebels, like they like brought hatchets and shit. Like, I mean, they didn't hurt anyone, but
Yeah.
like they, they had weapons and they,
Yeah, and they didn't want people to be like, "Oh, we could do that too."
yes,
Because then they
they,
were in charge after that.
yes, they did not want to give people ideas.
Mhm.
But in the 1820s, so enough time has passed now because this happened in 1772. Enough time had passed. There was this new generation of writers who wanted, they wanted that American story. They wanted to have this like moment, this like linchpin, this like, this is why we
Sure.
did the revolution type
Uh-huh.
of, lie, essentially. They
Yeah,
wanted they
yes.
wanted the big lie and they found it
Mhm.
in they rebranded this event as the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
They played up the carnival atmosphere, the fact that they were wearing costumes, the fact that like some of them were like drinking because,
Mhm.
why the fuck not? You're doing crime, like you might as well have a good time.
Yeah,
um,
I mean,
so they renamed this, the destruction of the tea or the action against the tea, which is how it was known at the time. They now called it the Boston Tea Party.
yeah.
Once the story could be told playfully, it became this like popular kid story.
Mhm.
Kids don't know any better. They love to fucking dress up. And they hear that like
Kids
there were adults that were dressed like Indians. I'm going to dress like an
uh-huh.
Indian.
Kids
Um
love a tea party.
they do. They do love a tea party. Oh my god. This works on so many levels. So there unfortunately is this is what became our school text. And even sadder still, this is what became our adult text. Our
Yes.
adult text as well.
That's
It's this
unbelievable.
declawed, simplified version of all of these like intersecting events that all happened that were very revolutionary at the time. Were just simplified and also
Mhm.
erased of its
Yeah.
economic and political content and power. Like this shit
Yeah.
was revolutionary, but like not like I said, not for the reasons that we learn about in school. There
Yeah.
was a corporate fucking tax break that lowered the price of tea in America by eliminating the corporate tax. Like, bitch, you're not paying any corporate tax? Like, what?
Everyone should be cheering, but yeah.
Yeah. And
What?
the
Huh.
whole like things that are too big to fail, our issue with competition, we love free market and yet we also kind of hate competition in a free market. And we like to have these big monopolies that
Mhm.
become too big to fail. Yeah, this story just and also racism, like the whole fucking anti-Chinese like oh, the tea is tainted with fleas. Yeah,
Oh
you're
my
like, "What?
god. Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
getting tea from the same source, sir and madam?
Literally.
What?" This
Yeah.
story just had so much when I started to look into it, I'm like, "I'm gonna fucking tell this story because it's like, it is so wild."
Yeah.
And it's way more than a party, and I want people to know that. The end.
Oh my god, thank you for telling that. That it was so unbelievably enlightening and like I so foundational and so like like why have none of us ever heard this story before?
I heard this in passing on another podcast.
That is
On a
unbelievable.
podcast that talked about the red fart instead of the red wave. They
Yeah,
mentioned,
yeah.
like, in passing that, like, oh, the Sons of Liberty, they were wealthy merchants and smugglers, and they weren't, like, the people,
Mhm.
the people in the
Yeah,
sense that we
yeah.
think of the people,
Sure,
and they were
yeah.
pushing for their own interests. They were mad that there
That's
was cheap tea in the colonies. Bitch,
that's
what?
unbelievable. Yeah. I also feel like I need to I just want to point out the fact that like in my last full episode when I talked about the Detroit uprising, I talked about the fact that words matter, words have meaning. And
Yeah.
like if you look at all of these different events over the course of history, we call the Boston Tea Party a party.
A
We
party,
call
yeah.
we call the Whiskey Rebellion a
Yeah.
rebellion.
Rebellion, you're right. Yeah.
But when it
Oof.
comes to black people
Yeah. Yeah, you're
having
right.
uprisings against the police, it's a riot.
It's a riot. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even like draw that parallel, even though I just heard that story. You tell it
Yeah.
live. Yeah, yo, that's real.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was real. Like literally, I had to go through my outline because I was pulling
Yeah.
research from other places and doing a lot of like,
Yeah.
copying and pasting and then rewriting things.
Yeah.
But like every single source, everything, even very progressive people talking about this still call it
Yeah.
the Detroit riot because
I mean,
that's what
it's
it is called in history.
yeah.
It's the
I
Detroit riot.
I think I think with millennials, we are starting to, like you said, realize that words have meaning, and we are
Yeah.
starting to change the words that we learned as children and even as young adults. Like this is something that I consciously have to do.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely.
Especially when it comes to like slavery and like enslaved people, like all of these things, like this has been very recent. I mean, it's so overdue, but it's only been very, like, I would say within the last like 5 years that people are really
Yeah.
talking about how we need to be careful with our language because our words have power,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
using the
And
words that they use is it's not the way. And I edit a
yeah,
lot of my stories and I'm just like, no, I'm not saying that because that's not true.
yeah.
That's not
No, I had to
uh,
like search through the whole story for the word riot and I only left it in places where it was in direct quotes. But
yeah.
like the fact that the Whiskey
This is
Rebellion
called a
is
party.
yeah, I know. The Whiskey Rebellion, those people literally tarred and feathered people and like
Yeah.
stripped people
So
naked, like, and
so the
we get to
Sons
call
of
that a rebellion?
Liberty, yeah, the Sons of Liberty are the ones who started the tarring and the feathering,
Of
um,
course, of
as
course.
a punishment. Yeah, and it's there's so
Yeah,
much
they get
there.
that's not a riot. It's a rebellion or a party.
Oh my god, a
I'm
party.
gonna start calling it the Detroit party.
Yeah. They just need to be
Oh,
wearing, like, really racist costumes, and then it's
I mean,
really a
yeah.
party.
Oh, Lord. All
Yeah,
right.
it's
Well,
so
yeah,
funny. I'm like, I thought this was gonna be so short, and it's just very long,
it's
but it's okay.
yeah, yeah.
Alright, we took a
All
break.
right.
It's
Well,
fine.
thank you for telling that story. It was it's so good, so important for people to
Yeah,
know the real
so
story
important.
behind this. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, we all can see the thread. I mean, it's not
Hmm.
even a thread, it's, like, pulled from the headlines. Like,
Yeah.
we're
Exactly.
we're living in the same timeline that this happened, just, like, so many 100 years later. And
Yeah.
I still like that does not demoralize me. Like for me, this knowledge gives me power and it gives
Yeah.
me like a firm footing to know like no no no. There is a reason why people are pushing against corporate power and this has happened for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But we don't
Absolutely.
learn about it. And if I really do think if we learned about it, things would be different.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that they
For
would.
sure.
I absolutely know
Yeah.
that they would because I think that's I mean, Europe still has a lot of trash legacy, but like they learn history and because
Hmm.
of it, they change in ways. Could they change in bigger ways? Absolutely. But like
Yeah.
they change in ways that we have not because we don't
Yeah.
have that knowledge. We don't learn about what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get lies.
100%.
We get myth.
It's wild. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that was incredible. I like really so good. So good. Thank you. Thank you for telling that. My drink has long
Yeah.
done been
This
empty.
drink was delicious. Like I feel like it
yeah.
paired really well. Like I felt like, oh, I'm like in a tavern and back in the day,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
I have scurvy.
Well, that's why there's lime juice in there, so you
Yeah,
don't get
right.
the scurvy.
I'm avoiding. I'm having this medicinally because I don't want scurvy.
Uh-huh. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, and I guess we're done.
Yeah.
America's history is juicy. We just add porter beer and rum and lime juice and all sorts of funky shit.
Try it. It's real good, y'all.
No
Real
big
good.
deal.
A little bit of rum.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Beyond Reproach. And a big thank you to our audio editor, Dev. We could not do this without you.
Yes, we could not. Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Beyond Reproach. Please note that we are not historians, we're just a couple of drunks who never shut up and love history. A full list of all source information can be found in the show notes on our website. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Written reviews are especially important. If you like us, please do one of two things. Leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts, or send this episode to a friend, family member, or someone who you think would be into it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and make sure you follow us on Instagram because we post our cocktail recipes the Thursday before each full episode. Please drink along with us if you are not driving. We also have a shop on beyondreproachpod.com. Get your merch, brand yourselves, and we also have exclusive content on Patreon where you can directly support the production of our show.